And then, for the first time in a long time, it's in a no man's land where it's still in the sidereal sign of Capricorn, but for what, that's 9 degrees, so 500-600 years, there's not really any constellation there. So it's in between Capricorn to the Sagittarius, from the goat to the archer. So the age would have different phases. So trying to organize history and see these things going back, going forward, it's done more by intuitive. There are books about these things, but they're written by intuitives who've seen the story of the zodiac and seen it, and usually they're in sidereal material, written about the zodiacs and the ages of man, and it's been in a lot of occult and theosophical material. There's good inspirations around it. The only thing that's a little sloppy is it's not as exactly anchored down by calendar as it could be. When you anchor down with calendar, you could still apply those teachings and see them working through. Now, okay, so let's come back. The Aquarian age, 2703. To me, it's whenever all the rulerships change from Jupiter to Saturn. Which would you prefer? We look at how misguided and how complicated our world's being run, how polluted, how complicated, how multifaceted, how insidious, and how strangely between faith and belief and migration, how the world's moving and evolving. There's more and more people getting more and more organized in one way, but according to what beliefs, according to what understandings, they're merging into each other. But in the spin-off, there's not people being responsible for pollution we're just starting to see hints of some of these things coming up, or the need for them. Well, if the water starts to be all polluted and damaged, I think in the age of Aquarius, they'll be drinking bottled air and buying bottled air as well as bottled water. I think we'll be living in Saturnine military existence, and there'll be rules like if you're not compatible, you may not be allowed to be married, or if you're not doing good to have a kid, there may be rules around these things that the system is determining. I mean, we see pieces of that in China. You can only have one kid, and now it's loosening up. But those type of those type of controls may become necessary to preserve a fragile nature. So everyone thinks it's just one end, and we're going on, we're getting this understanding, it's going to blossom into a rapture, it's going to be the completion of everything. Oh, wow, it's going to be fantastic. When really, I don't think the world's ending. I think we're going to spend thousands of years cleaning up the messes of the last few thousand years. So the advents of machines and the speeding up of things, all the mechanical things built have all taken away things from nature. When there was more peace, tribes were fighting, but there was more peace, there was simpler things. Now everything's so fast and it's going to be hard to we're getting out of touch with nature in our civilizations, in our communities, in our million piece cities with millions of people. And the more we get, it's so social, it's exciting, it's interactive, it's inspiring, but it's further and further away from nature, and people are getting sicker and sicker. It's probably not a war that could cut down the planet as much as a disease or something that people don't have the natural antibodies or immune system, a strong enough immune system to fight them. Whew. Okay, where are we? We're just about talk through what I wanted to say about this. This is open-ended stuff. It's just new information, and it's there as a wonder, as a thing. What? It's not going to make sense to what you know with your natal chart and the transits and stuff right away, but you can see these are other implications that could be there, and it's a puzzle. You're wondering about it. Well, what? How does this relate? So getting an understanding of the sidereal or the constellational chart, understanding constellations and wondering where that is in the chart, being able to go out and look at the sky and see a constellation and know what area of your chart that is. So you look up for, you see something where Saturn's in Capricorn, and you go to the sky to look for it, it's going to be in the constellation of Aquarius, of the Archer, not in Capricorn, not in the Goat. So like you have to know there's a difference when you're looking out and the difference with the seasons. And measure space and time are two different things. The cycle of the zodiac, of the tropical zodiac, the circle of space of the sidereal. So the sidereal is trying to see when something gets back to exactly the same point in space, back to the same place, behind the same stars in the same place. So that's being measured in the sidereal or in the constellational. But when you're dealing with the tropical, when it gets back to the same phase of the cycle, and because there's a precession, this little bit that moves, 15 minutes, 26 seconds every year and changes. 52 minutes, oh, now we got, okay, getting older, old moment, but it builds up to the 71 degree of 7 years, but it's moving each year. That's our leap year factor. The tropical zodiac is moving and it's changing. We're watching the cycles. We're not watching when it gets back to the same point because that's back a little further, like because we've had this mutation. We've had this, the circle is different than a cycle. A cycle is a perfect circle, like timing is a perfect circle. Space is a perfect circle. You can measure a perfect circle. There it is, 360 degrees. But a circle, a cycle in time, is supposed to be even, but there's often that speeds up and slows down. It's not a uniform speed along the whole cycle. So most of the planetary orbits, we're measuring them in cycles. They're really ellipses. I mean, much of the mathematical distinctions and scientific things, everything's just perfect circle. It's like they're measuring music. It's just perfect time, these perfect circles, but that's the theory. The reality is everything's distorted in ellipses, but to a Puritan, those are sinful things to distort a circle or to abstract a circle or distort the perfection of the perfect circle. And to warp it, oh, that's sinful. Nature is sinful. Boom, it's distorting it. Yes, wow. So I think it's just different perceptions between the idealist going up to see the perfect circles or the numbers, and the experiential factor of nature is a little bit not the perfect circle, just a little bit off of it. There's warps, there's waves, and these affect the timings. They show up, these affected timings will affect the timings in the zodiac. And those timing, but when you're measuring something in space, it'll still have an effect, but looking to get when it comes back, when something comes back to the same star in the sky, it's very different when something comes back. Say you had a new moon and it's conjunct a certain star and you want to catch the next new moon. It's not going to be at the same star. Like there's a shift that goes on in the whole system moving while the moons are moving and while the cycles are moving. So there's slight differences in time between the tropical timings and tropical timing events and sidereal timing events. Not huge, but little ones. And the techniques, people will adhere to one thing or another. Often I find that sidereal zodiac, because it's looking at space and the exact stars and something they're looking for exact events to happen at exact times, and this is when it's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. They're getting very, I consider invasive, but very specific details about when things are going to happen. How many kids you have, when you're going to die, when you're going to get married. It's very specific things. However, I see it more as cycles and choices and options as we go along. Not so specific. In the tropical zodiac, it's not, there's a tendency to see the more the behavioral, the psychological, the implications of attitudes and things. Whereas in the Vedic system, there's a tendency to be much more, I got to know exactly when this is going to happen. They're looking for exact dates, and sometimes that can seem too narrow-minded from a psychological or a Western perspective. But in all of them, you have a difficult aspect, you have difficult planets, you have difficult energies. It's in a certain sign. Well, that sign is ruled by a certain planet, which rules certain herbs and certain gems. You can use these herbs, you can use these gems to change the energy. It's the beginnings of medicine, of herbology, of gemology, of vibrations, of oils, of scents, of things. So all healing came out of applying these logics of these phases, of these cycles, of these textures to what's normal for you around your natal chart. That's what's normal for you. Everything else is different. But we jumped up a notch really fast to look at these things, and I just got to show it to you and let you sit on it and stew on it. You come back and look at it, go over it time again, and at times you may never run into anyone talking about these things, but you might. If you're at a conference, you're at an astrology conference, or you go to India, or you go to other places, you're going to run into people with these discussions. And it helps to know where you are within this. Not that because they believe the sidereal zodiac is the only one that the tropical isn't there. They're both there, but they're working on different frequencies. But in all the systems, once you put the houses in, the planets are in the same houses. The aspects are the same, but they're different horoscopes are made simpler. This is a very sophisticated horoscope. It has the exact degrees, has the degrees for the tropical, has the degrees for sidereal, and it's much more. It's like using a fine-tuned telescope and taking an old Vedic chart with just the box with the square, the 12 squares in it, and there are 12 areas in it, and each one represents a house, and you write the signs in and you memorize the rest. That's a very simple way. Not invalid. It's dealing with houses more than signs. And a lot of astrology still is taught, memorize the houses, and everything happens in the signs. You just read everything into the house, affects this affair, that affair. And that's one way, but it's still not as clear. With computers, you get really clear information now. You can act much more accurately. So if you're going to have an operation, would you prefer someone to use a real scalpel, or would you rather use a bread and butter knife? Well, if you don't have the scalpel and they only got a bread and butter knife, well, it's going to hurt more. You're not going to be as accurate. So if you can use a good telescope and you can see things clearly, why would you use a fuzzier one that you don't see as clearly with? So that's happened to me with the forms. I had to see the charts, I had to see the heavens, I had to see, and getting these chart forms really allowed me to establish my relationship to these things. And not just in one moment, over my 50 years of my career, it's become familiar territory. So everyone will have their own unique balances when they look at the zodiac. When you're looking at the sidereal, go right to the constellations, look at the gaps, look at the overlaps, look at the myths, look at the stories, and see how they might have an effect in. There's another mystical book about the constellations that's written in a fairy tale or a mythological way, but it has a spiritual guides inside of it. It's written by the Church of Light, C.C. Zane, and it's called Spiritual Astrology. But what it's really talking about is the decans, but not decans as people with 10 degree divisions of the zodiac. It would be, those 10 degrees would be, you took these constellations and you follow the constellations going up from to the North Pole, and whatever is the first constellation north, that's in Aquarius, that would be the first decan. The second one going up would be the next constellation would have a next story, and they would divide the 12 zodiac into 36, each having 3 influences of star constellation groupings going up from the zodiac. But it's written very nicely, so it's a good book to have to refer to. C.C. Zane, Spiritual Astrology. It's in the Church of Light books. Okay, I think I'm done here. How are we doing for time? Oh yeah, we're right on time. Okay, so this is it. We're starting on our deeper considerations, and each class is going to be giving a lot of information. You don't have to study it, it's just there and you're looking at it, you've been exposed to it. Next week, we're going to deal with color psychology, and how to use color in the zodiac, and you interpret how to use color, how color fits the zodiac. Okay, that's it. Thanks. Good night. Close this.